So that's the bit of advice that I have for any aspiring leader, especially a school administrator, whether it's in the public, charter, or private school space, is be as visible as possible and really, really try to interact with as many folks as possible and to be a good listener. And really, that's how you improve your school, But that's so important. Don't be that principal or that administrator that's stuck in your office for 8 hours a day. You need to get out there.
Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations with Jonno White podcast. Today's guest is Kevin Macki. Kevin is the Director of School Relations at Calvary Christian Academy and Schools United in Florida in the USA. Welcome to the podcast, Kevin.
Well, thank you, Jonno. It's a pleasure to be with you, and just thank you for all you're doing with these leadership roundtables.
Yeah, no worries. It's been great to have you at the table and to share your knowledge and wisdom. I had a great roundtable actually just yesterday, as of recording this last night, about leadership pipelines, and we had someone from Sweden, and we had someone from Egypt, and someone from Nigeria. So yeah, I've been getting so much out of those. Let's talk about you though. Tell us about what you do in your role, and a little bit about Kevin.
Sure. My main role. So I was a public school teacher for about 10 years and an administrator, and jumped over to Christian education. I was a head of school at a school in the Miami area for 8 years. And I assumed the role of director of school relations at Calvary and about 14 months ago. And my main role is to expand Schools United's reach around the world. So our mission is to create a role-specific peer network for basically any role you can think of on a school campus. So it's a lofty goal, but our ultimate goal is a peer network for every education professional, every Christian education professional around the globe. So it's kind of like our 5-year plan.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you hear everyone talking about the current challenges in a changing world with AI and post-COVID. And one of the biggest things is feeling disconnected and lonely. And what I love about your vision is for Christian schools to say, as it's like that saying, I love thinking about say teenagers and in my work with young people in the past, it's like they just need one friend. It's like if you've got one friend, that'll help them turn up. And it's a bit like that, but different for what you're doing. It's like if you've got one supporter, one person you can pick up the phone, you can send a text to, you're going to be catching up with them online or face to face in a couple of weeks. And if you can have multiple of those, it's a game changer for that sense of support and well-being. And so, yeah, I love the vision. I'm a big fan.
Thank you, Jonno. Yeah, we're excited and we see the potential that it has. So we've been doing it in the South Florida area for a few years now, and we see the unity among these schools that before were somewhat in competition with one another. Those barriers have been broken down. In Palm Beach, Broward County, and Miami-Dade County, you have schools that are elite of the elite private schools that are sharing resources with the small Christian school down the street that has maybe 100 students in it. And it's everyone just sharing ideas, best practices, resources. It's quite beautiful to see the unity that's happening.
Yeah, amazing. Well, you guys are doing an amazing job, and let's chat about you and your leadership story. The first question I always ask is going back to your childhood and thinking maybe it was when you were little, but maybe also school age. What moment or moments come to mind that really shaped you into the leader and person you are today?
Yeah, I think for me, I'd never really thought of myself as a leader growing up. I think a pivotal moment for me is one thing I am is a hard worker. So I remember it was really leaders, coaches, just adults that were in my life that kind of saw something in me. and it was more me just leading by example. I wasn't really the rah guy. I think I became a little more extroverted and outspoken as I got a bit older. But yeah, turning point for me. I remember in high school, my basketball coach just. I remember we were doing off-season conditioning, and I was just really motivated to work hard and really improve myself. And I was kind of a soft-spoken guy, and he rallied the team before the season. He says, we're going to name a captain this year, and he kind of did something interesting that he just kind of went around and asked everyone. And I guess no one really thought of me as, the vocal leader type. And he basically said, yeah, Kevin's going to be our captain because he really worked hard this off season and busted his butt. And it's funny how those little moments in life, it kind of gave me a little bit of confidence where, man, maybe I can lead. And I've been blessed after that in any role I've had, being identified by the leader you know, as someone that has leadership potential, going back to when I taught, becoming a department chairperson right away, and then a liaison with the district for professional development. And then I made the jump to Christian education and became a head of school. So yeah, it's funny how, all it takes sometimes is someone taking an interest in you and seeing something in you that probably you didn't see. So yeah, that's how it all started for me, and just got me interested in leading folks, and just really trying to
Yeah.
be a servant leader and lead by example. That to me is crucial for any leader, is not being afraid to pick up a mop, or just because folks they're looking at you for guidance and wisdom and leadership. My philosophy is really being that servant leader that's not afraid to get their hands dirty.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that story you share of your basketball coach because, um, I'm working on a book at the moment about that really is about delegation and how to empower people. It's called Replace Yourself. And
Mm,
there's a couple of really key ideas in this book, which is the principle of, the power of the ask. And it's about how so often we in leadership we don't realize how powerful it is to just ask someone, and sometimes even knowing that someone probably isn't in the season to do something, but maybe even still give them the invitation to say, hey, I want you to know that I see this in you, and what do you think? Would you be interested in doing that? I thought maybe there might be other things going on, but I still wanted to ask you. But there's another thing, which is the principle of the vision conversation. And that's what I feel like your basketball coach did in a way with you,
mm,
which was the vision conversation principle is a bit more proactive for leaders around saying, okay, if you identify someone with that potential, go and have a conversation where you tell them that. And I know it sounds so ridiculously obvious, but
mhm,
all of us can think about people we're leading or people around us and the potential we see in them, and then stop and ask yourself, have you told them that? And, if you see someone in a school, if there's people listening and you see them as a potential head of school, have you shared that with them? And often the answer is no. Well, it hasn't come up. I didn't want to overpromise. Or there's lots of reasons we don't. But I think I love your basketball
sure.
coach saying, actually, everyone look at Kevin. Here's what he's doing. He's modeling it. He's working hard. And that was someone saying to you, you've got the potential. You can be a leader.
Yeah, it's and in turn, I mean, if you think about it, what a move by him. That's true leadership. Because sometimes I take pride in the fact that something that was very important to me when I was a head of school is that I was always trying to raise up leaders around me. Just grooming the next generation or whatever you want to call it. But that is such an important feature of a leader, is like you're really trying to build up future leaders, uh, in part to surround yourself with the best people possible, but also thinking of the future. The reality is that one day we won't be here. Um, we'll be retired, or, think 20, 30 years from now, any organization that you've represented, you really, one of the most vital pieces of what you do as a head of school or a leader of an organization is is nurturing and bringing up that next crop of leaders. And I think sometimes that's not spoken of as much as it should be. But I think that's such an important aspect, is identifying those leaders and then guiding them, nurturing them and eventually raising them up to leadership roles is so crucial.
Yeah, that's so good. You're actually, as you're sharing that, I'd never thought about this before until you said it, but it's, I even just was saying to someone earlier today around schools, I think that for me, the ultimate kind of fruit of my work with a school is you want to create a culture that people would move cities to work in. And I love
Mm,
that. And I've been really comfortable sharing that. And I feel like, yeah, that's a good kind of litmus test. But I think you just shared as well that maybe this is another one of the things that I should add to that is any, whether it's a school or a business or a church or an organization, whatever it is, or a nonprofit, I feel like, okay, if you want to really be a great leader, a great servant leader, if you want to leave a legacy, if you want to have a massive impact, then another one of the things you probably want to be is, I call these in schools principal factories. Your school
mm,
should be a principal factory, and your
sure.
church, your company should be a leader factory. Like, you should look around and count one, two, three. Like, over time, there should be all these other schools or all these other companies where your kind of alumni are now off leading, doing even greater things than you. That
Absolutely.
is, I feel like, if that's, like you said, we don't think about that enough, but that's got to be right up there as one of the, I feel like a bit of a KPI
Sure.
for your life as a leader, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's such a vital component of what we do as leaders. Um, yeah, and perhaps it's not spoken of as much as it should be, but it really is an important. And along those lines, Jono, I've always thought, and I've seen it in different leaders that I've worked under. Some did it better than others, but it's not being afraid to be outshone by someone. I think the great leaders, they have confidence in themselves, and they take pride and enjoyment in letting others shine. Um, I think that's also very important.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. That's one of the top two things that's come out of this podcast for me. 230 episodes so far, and listening has been the number one thing that came up the most, is how important
Sure.
listening is. But the second thing is exactly what you just described. It's like, there's something about a leader who isn't threatened and will even
Mhm.
deflect success and praise to you if you're leading up to them. If I'm on someone's team and they're not threatened by me, and they'll even share the praise with me, but then they'll take the bullet
Yeah.
for me. They'll actually, that, yeah, I've always thought of that as important, but I feel like that comes up so much with my conversations with leaders.
Mm.
Um,
Interesting.
is if you can do that, that's one of the traits of, I think that's an amazing trait that we all should aspire to have.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let me ask you about your journey along the way. We had the basketball coach, and then there's been many seasons from then to now. Not that you're by any means an older man. I'm not saying that, but you're experienced.
I'm getting
Uh,
there.
yeah. I'm getting experience too. I'm getting more and more experience. Um, what would you say? Can you think of, in your leadership journey so far, any aha moments that really stand out to you, where you learned something in terms of, you did it well and you went, or you saw someone else and you went, that is genius, or where you dropped the ball and learned a really important lesson, and anything in between?
Yeah, I definitely something that I'll tell you one thing that I just admire. So let me make sure I have the question right. Just seeing what number one, seeing what other folks have done, maybe other leaders have done right, and kind of picking that up from them. Was that part of the question?
Yeah, it's about the biggest aha moments you've had where the light bulb
Got it.
went on as a leader.
Yeah, aha moments. I think on a negative side for me, something that I've gotten better at over the years is just kind of managing impulsivity. Not in a bad way, like it's not that I have a temper or anything like that, but just kind of letting things really marinate and really thinking it over, without trying to check the box or just get something done quickly, something like that. That was a tremendous area of growth for me throughout my career, from year one as an administrator until until now. That was something that definitely I saw that more seasoned veterans did better than I did when I started in the field. And it's, you know, for example, just responding to an angry parent, or maybe having to deal with a disgruntled employee or something like that of that nature. Just really giving it time and really thinking it over, not having to feel like you have to react quickly to a situation, I think is really important. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for, say, a newer leader or younger leader who's listening and goes, "Oh yeah, that's," I think that's something I do. I'm a bit impulsive. What advice would you give them, like in terms of when something hits the desk or when that email comes in? How do you think about it? How do you approach it now compared to then?
Yeah, compare. I think when you're a younger administrator or a younger leader, you're so worried about getting to things quickly. Uh, but really, it is in your best interest, even if you have to take a little more bit more time, whatever that timetable is, depending on the situation. But really thinking it through and then seeking counsel of people that you trust is really vital, just so you can have a different perspective on things. Um, because oftentimes you might see it from a different angle than someone else, and someone externally might. So I think those are really important. Having a good team around you that you can trust and go to, and really taking time to look at every single angle of something, and am I responding in the most prudent, the most effective way, I think is vital.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. Uh, and so I'm interested to know, along the way, you mentioned those, veterans who approach things differently. Can you share about any of your mentors along the way who have had the most significant impact on you?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah, someone
mm,
that is a good friend is Alex Gispert. He was actually part of the team that hired me at the first Christian school that I went to become a head of school. And just a really smart guy, composed, um, really knew how to work with the staff well, which I think I do as well, and I take pride in. But I definitely picked up some tricks from him, just in the sense of going all out, doing as much as you can for the school culture. And really that's vital, especially in Christian education, where at least in the US, I don't know how it is in Australia, on average, they're probably making 60-70% of what a public school teacher makes. So if you can't pay the salaries that they would make in the public school system, really you have to make sure that you create a culture where they enjoy coming to work, they feel inspired, they feel challenged in a good way. So really learn some really good tricks from him, and really learn the importance of school culture, and something that I took pride in, just making sure it was a good working environment, that my teachers were appreciated, that I strategically use compliments with them. It gets to a point where you're complimenting too much, and you know, it can kind of lose its effect. But just making them feel appreciated day in and day out is what I learned from him. And then someone I know that Jonno, is Dr. Jason Rachels. I've known Jason for a couple of years now, and it doesn't sound like a long time, but I have learned so much from him. It's a blessing that my office is right down the hallway from him, and we have a weekly meeting, a weekly hour meeting, and just watching him in action, uh, he is so composed. I tell him all the time, I hope that rubs off on me, because no matter the situation, he stays so composed. He's got a great poker face, but I
mm,
really think it's he he puts all his trust in the Lord, number one, but also he is a calming force on that campus. And Jason's so busy. He's the president of Calvary, which I don't know if you're aware of this, John. I know he's humble, so he probably didn't tell you during his interview, but Calvary is the largest Christian school in the country, in the U.S.
Wow.
Four campuses, about 3,700 students total. So it's a big organization to run, and some of the plans that they have to expand, and it's amazing. It's amazing what the Lord is doing, and it's. I know he's humble, but leadership really matters so much, as you know. And Jason has just done a phenomenal job there at Calvary, and he's been there from the beginning. Calvary is celebrating its 25th anniversary, and Jason's been there from the beginning of its inception. So
Wow.
he's seen it all, and it's amazing what they've done in 25 years, because that's a relatively young school for what they've done. Uh,
True.
and leadership matters. Yeah. So it is a blessing that I'm able to work with him and collaborate with him so much because of Schools United, because that's Schools United is his baby, and I'm my main goal and my job is to expand our peer networks around the globe, and obviously I don't want to let him down because it's something that he holds true to his heart. So, you know, Jason's still very much involved in Schools United, but with all that he has going on, obviously I'm here to lend the 40 hours or the 50 hours a week to it.
Yeah, amazing. And you guys are seeing incredible results in a short time as well I think because of the leadership. And so was the first person you mentioned, was that Alex? Is that his name?
Alex Gisper, yeah, Alex was
Yeah.
he held my position at Horeb Christian School in the Miami. He was my predecessor. Um,
Hmm.
then he was at another school in Miami, and now he's at Norfolk Christian Schools in Norfolk, Virginia.
Amazing. Well, I want to
But yeah,
ask you about
great guy.
Alex and Jason. Whether there's anything that comes to mind. You've already talked about some traits that they have that make them such great leaders. But are there any specific stories or moments that you can think of where you were like, "Oh, that's right, I was so impressed with how they handled that," or any kind of sayings that if you know how someone says something and you work with them, and after a while you catch yourself saying it, or anything like that come to mind for either of them?
Yeah, one thing I could think of with Alex, and really, Alex can't take credit for it because one of my, uh, she's really a mentor of mine, and I know it's funny these connections, but I worked under her in the public school system as Lisette O'Halloran, sorry. But Alex also has a connection to her. So she had a saying that Alex used and I used as well. And it was always telling the teachers and the staff members to include me on the liftoff so I can be with you on the landing. And in essence, what that means is any kind of issue you're facing or any possible issue that you're facing, make sure to include the leader so we can be there to support you if anything goes bad or when that situation arises. So it's always a saying I remember. Alex started to use it a lot, but he didn't coin the phrase. It's really a mutual friend. It's a mutual friend of ours, but I would also use
That's
it from
great.
time to time with the staff.
I really
Yeah.
like that because I love little sayings like that because it reminds me of one of my favorite sayings that I heard from a leader in my world and at my church, Kath Tallick. She would always talk about how leaders need to be, the thermostat, not the thermometer. You know, don't
Mm,
don't
I like that.
don't join the temperature of the room, but actually set the
Yeah.
temperature of the meeting, of the room, of the
Yeah.
whatever you're doing. And yeah, those little sayings like that, I think sometimes can take a bit of a complex or a tricky kind of idea, and just when you put it like that, you're like, and I like that idea of you know, invite us in, let us be part of the liftoff so we can be there, with you for the landing. And that's great. I really like that. I'm going to use that.
Yeah. It's a great one. Yeah. Yeah. And then and Jason, it's just nothing nothing like that I can think of with Jason, but it's just Jason's general demeanor is so impressive. He's so even keeled, but a lot of energy, a lot of great ideas. Um, and I joke with him all the time. I'm amazed. Jason's never had a cup of coffee in his life, and I'm like, how do you do this without caffeine? Because I can't survive. But
Yeah.
his energy is amazing, and his passion. Uh, that's another thing. Jason's passion it's infectious. It really is. How he can have his hand in so many different projects, so many different ministries of Calvary, and just devote so much undivided attention to you, and just give you great guidance and wisdom. Yeah, that's Jason's amazing, just a tremendous leader. Um, yeah, that's really it with Jason. It's his composure, his demeanor, his energy. It really is infectious. So yeah, I've learned so much from him in a short amount of time.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing about both Jason and Alex. And let's jump into the Leadership Express questions, because these always take
Sure.
longer than I expect and they're always a lot of fun. Learn something. So the first one is, what book have you gifted the most to others?
What book have I gifted the most? At my previous job as a head of school, it was Todd Whitaker's book, "What Great Principles Do Differently." So I gave
Mm.
quite a few of those out to department chairs and folks I was grooming to be leaders within the organization. So that's a great
What
read.
what
Alex
principles
Gisper
do
gifted me that.
differently?
Yeah, by Todd Whitaker.
Awesome. I'll check it
It's
out.
great read. Yeah, it's a really good read for anyone aspiring to be a principal, whether it's in the public school system or the private school system.
Brilliant. Love a new resource I haven't heard of before. Thank you. What about a recent leadership lesson you've learned for the first time or been reminded of?
Recent leadership. Ooh, that's a good one. Nothing pops out right now. Um,
That's all right. I can do if something pops into your mind later. But
yeah, let's do that.
another
Yeah.
question. I had another question, which is, what are you most excited about in leadership at the moment? Is there anything around leadership, or ideas around leadership, or things that are happening around Schools United? Just anything that you're really particularly loving right now?
What I'm really loving now, Jono, is the synergy that's happening. So through our work, just the different connections we're making with different organizations. In fact, I just earlier this week I met with a potential new chapter in Japan. So a school in Japan reached out to me, and I met with their head of school and just heard about how Christian education is going in that part of Japan, and they're them wanting to partner with us and see how we can support and help establish a chapter, a peer network for educators in that area. So, really, what's inspiring me more than anything is just the connections and listening to what folks are doing in the realm of leadership all around the world. Talking with you and what you're doing to expand leadership and bring more ideas to it and connect folks. So that's really what I'm excited now is just the different forms of synergy that are happening. It's really
Hmm.
exciting, really exciting.
Yeah, me too. I share that same excitement and passion. What about favorite questions when you are in a situation, with parents or stakeholders, teachers, or with a group of heads of schools, or with, government? Or are there any questions that you think, oh yeah, that's probably one of my go-to questions that I tend to ask a lot?
Go to questions. I when I'm speaking with other leaders, whether it's school administrators or any type of leader in education, uh, one question I like to ask is what are you currently reading, or what are you currently listening to? Because I know so many people listen to
Mm.
podcasts like this now. Um, uh, if the discussion gets deeper, I love to hear about their philosophy of leadership. Are they more servant leaders? Are what is their philosophy? Um, what is their philosophy on education in general? What are their thoughts
Mm,
on assessments and testing? What you know it all depends who I'm speaking to, but I'm always interested. I'm always an educator at heart, so I'd love to hear their
mm.
thoughts on what are their thoughts on AI and how that's moving at an exponential rate, and are they proponents of utilizing it on a school campus, which I am. um, I think there's so many discussions you can get into, but it depends on the audience, depends on the person you're speaking with.
Yeah, no, there's some good questions. I love that. And you've already shared one of these, so I don't know if another one pops into your head. But what's a great piece of advice you've received from someone at some point where they gave you some advice and it just, has stuck with you, or it proved to be really helpful in that moment?
um, what bit of advice? Let's see. uh, I'm sure I've received a lot of good advice, but I'll give you one, and I'll be vulnerable here. I remember
Hmm.
being a young teacher, and it's there's a good conclusion to the story. I remember being a young teacher. It was probably my second or third year, and I was kind of that teacher. I felt as though I was a good classroom teacher. So I started off
Hmm.
teaching fifth grade. Fifth grade math and science was my first gig in education. I was a good teacher. I felt pretty well prepared, but my classroom management was horrible, horrible. And it got to the point that my neighbor, we shared a wall. She came to me one day. She was kind of that veteran teacher, had been doing it for 25 plus years. And she's like, "Listen, Kevin, you need to get your act together, in a tough love kind of way, and
Hmm.
I almost took offense to it. And I kind of my demeanor with her changed, my attitude towards her. And it's funny. I'd say close to 7, 8 years later, I came back to that school. I was invited to do a read along for Black History Month. It's And I remember seeing her, and I approached her because I had long since left the school, and I was an administrator already. And I'm like, "Mrs. Darling, I got to tell you, you said this to me once, and it was the best advice someone ever gave me. She kind of gave me tips on how to manage my classroom, and it was kind of like a kick in the rear end. It's like you need to get your act together and be a little tougher with the kids, a little more stern, do a little, better job with your classroom management. Here's how you do it." And it's tough to hear that sometimes from people, but really those are the people that care, and I think she appreciated that. So many years later, coming to her and,
Hmm.
and saying, "Mrs. Darling, thank you. Thank you for saying that to me at that time." And she remembered that. She remembered that exchange we had 7 or 8 years prior.
Wow.
Uh, so that was great advice because that really made me a better teacher. And it's hard, I think it's hard for a lot of young teachers because you don't want to be the bad guy. I was kind of the cool teacher, and I thought I was a good teacher, but my class was probably a little too loud, and I probably wasn't getting the most out of them either. So that's one
Yeah.
that sticks out for sure. And I'm glad that I was later on able to tell her thank you.
Yes. Well, that's true courage. I think and I see this a lot with Christian schools and Christian organizations. Is we're great at being kind and caring and sharing the positives, but the truly courageous and in some ways the truly kind thing to do is to do what she did from a perspective and from a place of having your back and wanting the best for you, but knowing that you might not want to hear it. And you didn't,
Right.
but then you to tell, I mean, I always love making a note of the fact that all these years later, you're sharing that story. And I think for all
Yeah.
of our listeners, it's a good reminder, who do you need to have the courageous conversation with, particularly for those who are wired to be the kind and caring. I think it's something I really struggle to do. And I want to be more courageous in the future to go, you know what? This is what they need to hear. This is going to help them. They may not want to hear it. And they may not like me because I share it with them, but I'm going to tell them because I want the best for them. Done from that heart, man, that's amazing. What a woman.
Yeah, yeah, tremendous educator. And, it was great because she modeled something to me that was very important in my leadership journey, that sometimes you need to have those uncomfortable conversations with folks. But I think the delivery is key, number one. So something, we said it in jest, but the folks around me that were department chairs when I was a head of school, or assistant principals or principals, whatever it may be, we always called it the compliment sandwich, which really doesn't make sense because the compliment's not in the middle, but that's what we called it. It was always leading with something positive, getting to the meat of it, what the issue is, but doing it in a caring, loving way, and then ending with something positive. So it just became standard practice for what I did whenever we had to deal with something delicate, or address a staff member or a parent or a student. Whenever it was something sensitive or something that maybe was something negative that you had to bring up, was always leading with something positive and ending with something positive about the person. Uh, and it proved to be a good technique. I thought.
Yeah, I talk about the 5-to-1 ratio a lot from the Gottman Institute, which is
Mm,
comes from marriage counseling, and but talks about, their research and experience showing that in a marriage, if there's 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction, that for them is a really important litmus test for the likelihood of a healthy future for a marriage. And I think that ratio plays, I think that's a great ratio for any relationship. And I think, so I think the important thing as well is, and I see this all the time, if you're a leader where you've got a 0-to-0 ratio at the moment, you're not really
right,
giving
right.
positive reinforcement, then when you do come in with the negative, it's going to blow them out of the water because your ratios are way off. And so I like the idea of saying, how do we and I think the other challenge with this type of feedback is we're great at being really specific with the negative, right? It's like, hey, I just want to give you that feedback on this day that I saw that the class was really loud because that kid was in. And then the positive is like, good job, And how do you make the positive interactions just as specific? Taking that time to seek out the people in your team or the people around you and stop or write a handwritten note or an email and say, hey, I noticed that when you were in that meeting with that person and I was sitting in on it, and the way you dealt with how they, that parent and how they were escalating, and you stayed so calm and you really diffused it and used these kind of words, that was brilliant. When you give it really, when you get into the specifics with the positive, I think that also helps that when you do need to give the negative, your ratios are in a healthier place.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that 5-to-1 ratio. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really helped.
And
It's really helped me. It's one of those things that takes we should be, positive. We should give more feedback. And you're like, yeah, but then it just gives you a handle to use. So I'm a big fan of that one.
sure,
Um,
I love
Fun question. What about a movie or a TV show that really impacted you? Can be serious, but I've had someone say Golden Girls, so it can be anything.
it.
What's something that just nostalgia, or I mean, for me, my all-time favorite is Band of Brothers. I don't know if you've seen that
I love, it's
series.
funny that you bring it up. I think I saw it earlier this year. I watched the whole thing on HBO. I love
Oh,
it. I love it. It's
yeah,
fantastic.
something about the
Yeah,
team. It doesn't really talk about. It's not really like, and they lead by doing this, but just watching how the leader, the great leader in that series leads,
sure.
just hits me every time. And the
I
truly
love when it's
life or
taught.
death. Oh, what a series! But
It
yeah.
is an amazing series. Yeah, yeah. Man, for me, oof, something, one that I was really big into. I think I had a dream to just like teach high school and be a basketball coach. And a movie for me growing up that I absolutely loved, I just found inspiring. just because it was kind of a David versus Goliath type story. It was Hoosiers. So I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's Gene Hackman. He
No,
plays
I
the
haven't.
basketball player. And it's a true story. It's actually in the United States, in the state of Indiana. They do not, I think to this day, they don't have classifications. So a school of 100 could technically win the state championship, but they can be going against a school of 4,000 kids. So this is a true life story of a school that had like 100 kids in the school, and they won the state championship, and it was a really big deal when it happened in the 50s. So yeah, if you ever get a chance, watch it. The music's amazing as well, and it's just a really good movie of the little guy, the underdog, winning. Um, but yeah, and
That's
anything with
so good.
Gene Hackman is an amazing actor. So yeah,
He
if you ever get
is.
a
Yeah.
chance, watch it. It's a gem, really is.
I'm going to add that to my watch list. I feel like that question is just my cheeky way of adding a new amazing TV show or movie to my watch list, but I'll check
Sure.
that out. Sounds like an amazing movie.
Yeah.
And last question of all, if you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, what would you say?
You know, this is going to sound very simplistic, but I remember in graduate school, I had a professor, Professor Sistone, saying his name in case he ever sees this because he was a phenomenal guy. But he used to tell us all the time, it's not as simple as this, but it won't hurt you, is be nice. Be nice in all your interactions with all your stakeholders, your parents, your students, your teachers, your staff, support personnel, whatever it is. Don't forget to show your human side and be nice. And it is so important. The other thing I'll say, John, or any leader, the culture within your school is so vital. Obviously, it goes without saying you want to make sure that your hiring practices are on point and you're onboarding those people and you're developing your staff and you're picking the right curriculum, um, and you have the right discipline plan in place. But the culture of your school is so important. So I encourage all leaders, and I know this is hard to do, but try to be outside of your office as much as you can during the school day. Let your staff know ahead of time. And I used to do this. I used to tell them, guys, listen, don't get freaked out if I just walk in your class. I'm not checking up on you as much as I want the students to see me and I want to be visible. And I want to make sure when I walk in the room, do you need anything from me? Is everything okay? So try to be as visible as possible. Have those great interactions with students in the hallways. Be out in the car line in the morning and the afternoon and talk to parents. Because the reality is that position, and something that same professor used to say it, and he would tell us, if you don't enjoy politics, you should never be a principal or a head of school, because there are political aspects to it. There really are.
Mm,
There really are in any leadership role if you think about it. So if you don't enjoy that aspect of it, it's going to be tough for you. I think you just need to embrace it and make sure that you're having those interactions with all your stakeholders, because it really is in your best interest to get them on your side. So that's
yeah.
the bit of advice that I have for any aspiring leader, especially a school administrator, whether it's in the public, charter, or private school space, is be as visible as possible and really, really try to interact with as many folks as possible and be a good listener. And really, that's how you improve your school. But
Mm.
that's so important. Don't be that principal or that administrator that's stuck in your office for 8 hours a day. You need to get out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a good point, and it's something that has been coming up a lot for me recently. Working with different leaders is about how I think what I've seen is with the school principal. If you stay in your office all day, the other thing that happens is that things escalate and escalate and escalate, and they
Sure,
end up in your office, and
sure.
suddenly everything's coming to your office. And I think what happens is when you get out there and you're at the school gate and you're having those little conversations with parents, with students, with teachers, you actually catch a lot of things really early. And what you do is you'll sort something out in a 5-minute conversation at the gate rather than having an hour meeting about it in your office 2 weeks later. And that's
Good
something
point.
that has really, yeah, that's really been a new learning for me is, And it's obvious with schools because you have that ability to meet your stakeholders by being present out of your office. But I think for any leader, it's like, how do you build connection and relationship with all those key stakeholders, having those little moments as often as possible? Because if you can do that, you actually diffuse a lot of situations, and less ends up being a 1 hour meeting in your office, which is a win for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point.
Mm. So presence, I love that. Be visible. So good. Such a great piece of advice for every leader when we can be tempted to go head down in my office working on the strategic plan. It's like, no, 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 no. That's leadership is being out there, walking the halls. Yeah, thank you.
It's
That's great
relationship.
advice.
Yeah.
It is. It's all about that. That's. It's all about people, and it's all about relationships and connection. I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. What a wonderful episode, and so many great sayings and things that I'll be stealing from Kevin and using elsewhere from today. That's got my mind kind of percolating. But most of all, I want to thank you, Kevin, for being so vulnerable and sharing stories from your life. And I just really believe this will be an encouragement to a lot of leaders, and for that person or those people out there who are right in that situation. And your words, I think, will be the thing to really help them make a decision. And so, yeah, it's been just wonderful to hear some of your story and your advice. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you, Jonno, for extending the offer, and thank you for all that you're doing. I know I've watched a few of these already, and I've been present at one of your roundtables. And just thank you for what you're doing, man. This is amazing. You're bringing folks together and just sharing your wisdom, and I know that I learn so much from you every time I have a conversation with you. So thank you for what you're doing.
No worries. You're so kind. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Jonno.